Hello and welcome to 8 lessons I learned while building my business. Firstly, thank you to all of you who are joining me live. And I believe that the video has just gone live. So hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here live. And for any of you who are watching this in the future, thank you for being here. Here's the funny thing. So I said to Noah a few weeks ago, oh, let's do a free broadcast, and it will be 8 lessons I learned while building my business. Well, here's what I'll tell you. Today, I have gone round and round the 20 lessons that I wanted to share and have managed, I think, to whittle it down to the 8 that I want to go with, but it was challenging. So thank you for giving me a challenge that I didn't expect today. And in a way, I was reflecting a lot today as I've been preparing on business and how business really is this creative jigsaw puzzle. And business used to scare me. It used to, even the word was a word that I felt I didn't fully understand. I liked it. I admired it. I had a respect for it, but I certainly didn't feel like somebody who could be a business owner or would understand how to be a business owner. And I can honestly say that 16 years later, it has been one of the biggest growth areas of my life. And I would say that self-growth and metaphysics and spirituality used to be my biggest area of growth. And interestingly, I've been running a very soul-focused business for 16 years. And I see business and what we create in business as this fantastic and fascinating spiritual journey. Trust me, there have been days where I've been like, or terrified or tired, but it's also a human journey, and we go through these growing pains as we learn to grow with the work that we put out into the world. And I think that's true whether you have a very small bespoke business that you want to keep small, that serves a small number of people, that has a small number of products. And I think the scale of a business that's big, sure, there might be other complexities to deal with, but I've spoken to and worked with a lot of business owners over the years, from the people who have billion-dollar businesses right down to people who perhaps have just got their side gig at the moment, and maybe they're making a few £1,000s or a few $1,000s on this entrepreneurial thing that they're starting to do every year, and they want to make it their full-time work. And there's definitely a very different set of circumstances when you begin to when you grow everything, but the lessons are often the same. And the simple lessons are some of the things that I wanted to share with you today. So I'm guessing most of you will know who I am, but for any of you who stumbled across this live broadcast and don't know who I am at all, I'll give you a quick potted history of how I ended up doing what I'm doing today. So today, I run a team of, I think there are 11, 12 of us, including our accountants. There are 12 of us who work with me to produce self-growth, wellness, and spirituality materials every month. We're a production company, and we produce and host events around the world, evening events, 1-2 day workshops, week-long retreats in places like Costa Rica. And that's something that I've been doing for a long time, but the scale of it now is different. We're now a 7-figure business. We serve hundreds of thousands of people every month, mostly with free work that people don't pay for, but that we invest money and time and energy into producing for the world. And we're serving around 3,000 to 4,000 people in live events each year, depending on how many events we do and the size of those events. And then, of course, there are online events. We've had many successful online courses each year. We average about 4 courses a year, and we serve around 10,000 students in online events every year. But if I dial it right back to the beginning, I began as a donation-based intuitive reader. So I first heard my guides a little over 20 years ago. It was something that was confusing and certainly taboo. I was not going to run out into the street and tell everybody that I was channeling, because that was something that even today is still can be a taboo area or a challenging concept for some people, but especially back then. It was something that I used to help friends with. And one of those friends suggested that I start doing it for a job for people I didn't know. And I was in a year of saying yes to things that scared me. It was a goal I had given myself as part of the self-growth workshops that I was attending and loving as a participant. But I never considered that self-growth could be a career path. I was a very happy workshop participant, and it was my hobby. It was what I did at the weekends when I'd saved enough money for the next workshop. I never thought that it would be my work. And yet 16 years later, it is my work. And what I will say is, if I now look back at some of the things that I've gone through in my life, I can see how many things I do today have roots in what I was already showing ability or interest in as a child. And a lot of those things have come together. So I tend to believe that anyone with an entrepreneurial or creative spirit, those seeds show up in you in various ways. And my spiritual belief is that as we go through life, we just continually grow, we continually learn, and everything prepares us for the next thing. So I won't spend too long telling you about who I am and what I do, but I'd love to share some of the key lessons that I've learned. So in no particular order, we're going to start with a phrase that many of you may have heard, but it's one that I've really adopted, and it's one that has helped me build the work that I do. And it's done is better than perfect. This is a really important phrase, not just to inspire you, but actually to adopt. And what I mean by that is you might be very uncomfortable putting work into the world that you don't think is perfect. So if any of you are perfectionists, this is a great opportunity to let it go. Every month I produce this video called The Energy Update, and it's where I take the pulse energetically, psychologically, emotionally on some of the themes that are showing up on the planet. And these days, around 300,000 or more people will see these updates. But when I first started back in 2012, doing direct-to-camera videos, there were around 13,000 views a month, which, to be honest, was a lot. I'd been working for a while, so I had a bit of a following, and I'd been doing a lot of live events. So when I put the first video out, 13,000 views on YouTube was really quite an amazing start. But the scale of it now is interesting because there was a time when I wanted to stop doing them. It happened in 2014, happened again in 2016. And one of the reasons I wanted to stop doing them was I was getting my opinion about the energy updates mixed up with the act of service that they are. Meaning, I would prioritize my ideas about what I felt had come out of my mouth in one of those intuitive videos. After I had pressed stop on the camera and walked away, I would be like, oh God, I could have explained that better. Oh, if I'd have known that I was going to start talking about self-love, I wish I'd given that example. Because the energy updates, like most of my work, are intuited, there is a certain level of surrender that I have to give. And my own mind may not always be satisfied with what I've done or how it looked or how it came out my mouth. And what I learned because of listening to the people who received the energy updates is the energy updates aren't for me. That doesn't mean I don't benefit from them, because I do. Like, I'll often hear something and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And then 2 weeks later, I'll see that show up in my own life. But I'm just one person, and I'm the deliverer of the product, if you like, or the service or the video. But my opinion is very different to what everybody else is getting out of it. So the Z's, my guides, said to me after one conversation with them that I was having when I walked away from filming one and I wasn't happy with it. They said, it doesn't matter what comes out your mouth. What matters is that you show up every month, and 50% of the effectiveness of these videos is them seeing that you are still alive on the planet going through it with them, which kind of gobsmacked me because it felt immediately very true, but it was something I'd never even considered. You know, in my head, I was thinking, oh God, was that enough? Was that detailed enough? That wasn't as complex or as detailed as it could have been if I'd done a written version. But for me, the energy updates are an energy transmission. And so being on video for them is part of the effectiveness for those who watch them. And as I went around the world, time and time again, I would meet people at live events. And when I was doing meet and greets at the end, people would say to me, thank you so much for the energy updates. They've really helped me. And as I heard that, I realized my done rather than my perfect energy updates had been helping people and had gone beyond me. And I think that's the truth of any service or product that we put into the world. We don't know how we're affecting other people. We don't know how the way that we show up for someone completely changes their life. So done is better than perfect is a really good way to stay creative and active and showing up, not just in your work, but in your life. So I think the only difference for this is if you are somebody who feels compelled to be a master novelist or a master musician who only brings out a book every 10 years or an album every 10 years, and it's supposed to be a masterpiece. But if you're like me and your work, your business is about showing up every day, every week, every month, being very alive and very present on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, you have to adopt done is better than perfect, because you may never create something that you think is perfect, but you never know how it will be affecting someone else. Okay. Number 2, don't let inner or outer critics stop you. I hear a lot people saying that they're afraid to put things out there in the world or online because of criticism or because of people not liking them or because people might attack them. People aren't going to like what you do. There will be some people who won't like you. They won't like your voice. They won't like your face. You might remind them of someone who's their nemesis, and so they've got it in for you. You might be a little too close to their personality. And if they see you as more successful for them and they're wrapped up in envy, they might want to go for you. And that's nothing to do with you and it's none of your business. But if you were to let the critics stop you, again, you wouldn't help the people that you and your service and your work and your compulsion to do your work or produce your service or produce your product, whatever it is. That compulsion needs to be served and not stopped by the 5 critics that might stop you getting to 50, 500, 5,000, 50,000, or 5 million very grateful people. Now, if you go to YouTube and pick a video, something you like, a video that you appreciate, that you benefit from, could be a music video, could be one of my energy updates, could be something from Eckhart Tolle, or it could be your favorite online chef. You will see on every single video, some people have chosen to hit they dislike it. Now, I don't know about you. I've never ever disliked a video on YouTube, and I don't think I've ever written a critical review. It's not really how I want to spend my time. But there are some people who feel to project a negative towards you or say they don't like it. Those people exist and they're everywhere. And if you are going to let them stop you putting your thing out into the world, you're going to stop the help that you can give to other people. Now, I said don't let inner or outer critics stop you. One of the things that often comes up for us is, and this is really helpful when you first start putting things out into the world, you will start to hear perhaps negative feedback. And I think feedback can be great. You know, someone might say something to you. I remember once I got, somebody said something to me about, oh, I know what it was. Someone had I saw a comment on my energy update, and I normally look at comments for the first couple, 2-3 days, just to kind of gauge how it's landing for people. And I saw a comment from somebody who was sharing it with their friend, and they said, "This is great." And the friend had replied on the page saying, saying, "Yeah, it's okay, but he goes on a bit too much for me. I could do this in a much more concise way." Now, my first thought, because I remember thinking, oh, and I thought, well, why don't you then? Because, you know, if you're bothered. But I also didn't disagree with her. This was quite a while ago, and I myself was trying at that point to learn how to refine talking in circles as an energetic, because that's how energy readings work. It's quite spiral, circular information. It's not necessarily left brain linear, and the job and the task is to make it left brain linear. So my point is, she had a bit of a dig in a way, but I also didn't disagree with her criticism. So sometimes feedback can be really interesting and really insightful, but when feedback's just kicking you or being negative, what you then get the opportunity to notice is, do you agree with them? And this is where your inner critic becomes very interesting. And that's where business or putting stuff out into the world is a self-growth path, because somebody might criticize 3 different things that you've done. And it's the 4th thing that they say that really gets you. Oh, they said I wasn't intelligent. Ah, that's interesting. So there's a trigger for you about being called not intelligent. So that's a great opportunity for you to go back through your history and go, when was I first told I wasn't intelligent? When did I first feel shame or less than because of that? So it can be really useful too to engage with criticism within a certain framework and in a certain way if you want to. So this is another just mindset piece. Don't let inner or outer critics stop you. One of the things that the Z's said to me early on was, they said the challenges around putting your work out into the public and the growth of your work, because they forecast that my work would grow, and it always used to scare me. They said the connections, the benefits, and the feeling of fulfillment will far outweigh any of the challenges. And I can honestly say that's true. So often, to talk ourselves out of doing anything, we will think of the worst case scenario and convince ourselves to not even take a step forward. I would say the opposite. Make sure you're walking towards the thing you want to do, and know that, you know, it is nerve-wracking to put yourself out there, but that's part of life and that's part of growth. Okay. It will get easier, by the way. Number 3, and this is to do with scaling your work, so growing the reach of your work. Stand behind your product or service. And I don't mean literally behind, I mean you have to tell people about it. It's quite common for artists or people who have created something to be very upset when that thing they've created doesn't catch fire in the world. I've seen this a lot. I've seen people go, well, I did my book, and I put my book on Amazon, and I self-published it, and my guide said it was going to be a really great book, and nothing's really happening. Or, you know, my instinct said this was going to be big. You have to tell people that your work exists, and you have to spend time doing that. You have to actually allocate time and energy to essentially market what you do, because it's a very busy world and people are focused on so many things, and the marketplace, Facebook, YouTube, our lives, there's so much competing for our attention that for us to decide what's right for us, we might need a bit more help than just scanning across your book cover on Amazon. So create some energy, do some interviews. There are lots of different ways to stand behind what you do. And I noticed when I went to see Jerry and Esther Hicks in 2007 in San Francisco, we'd paid $200 for this one-day workshop ticket. And I was excited to see Esther. I'd never seen her live. And I remember noticing I judged Jerry Hicks for the first 20 minutes. He stood on stage before anything had started. Jerry is Esther's late husband. And he basically told us about all their products and how we could join their members club. And I remember sitting there, and again, very British at that time. I hadn't been living in America. And I remember thinking, God, wow, but we're here for a workshop. How come he's now just trying to sell us all this stuff? Well, I will say that at the lunch break, I went to the stand and I probably spent $120 on really cool things that I took home, and some things I gifted, and some things I enjoyed myself, like a flip calendar and things that I then used. But honestly, if he hadn't stood there and explained it to me, I would never have really known what was available. And I learned this lesson myself in 2016 when we did a 28-date North American tour. And, a tour is expensive and live events are costly to produce. And there are lots of overheads. You might look at the ticket price as a participant, but you have no idea how much expense goes into hiring a venue, hiring AV, hiring lights, hotels, flights, all of that stuff. So it became very clear to me very quickly that on the nights on the tour that I was willing to tell people, and I would do it at the end, about the products that we had on the table at the back, we would sell 2 to 3 times the amount of products than we would on a night when I felt like I didn't want to mention it, because I felt like, oh, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to pollute my evening with telling people about things. But I have to say, certain nights, especially nights where we didn't have very big audiences because we were in completely new territories that we'd never been to before, and we were experimenting with where will people come. Selling 10 CDs made all the difference to the costs and the expenses. And more than that, with the energy updates, which are the videos I do, about 2 years ago, I started to tell people at the end of the energy update what it is that we have coming up and available. And I know that people can switch off that video at the end if they don't want to hear that bit, because anyone's seen it regularly. Oh, cool, I'll just switch off. But I had to find the courage in me, and I had to make the switch in myself, because it wasn't natural to me, that I realized we're spending a lot of time, energy, and money on creating these things for people, that if I don't stand behind them and if I don't tell people that they're here, it doesn't matter. It will just get lost in the shuffle. And so when I realized that started to change things in terms of how other people would engage with what it was I was creating, what it was me and my team were creating. So you can share stories about what you've created. You can share testimonials. I personally love to hear how other people have been affected by things. You can share behind the scenes details, and you can share samples. I think that's really important, a free sample of something. So that's just something to think about. Are you willing to stand behind what you're creating? Okay. Also to do with scale and outreaching with your work is video. Video is magnetic. Statistics show that the internet is becoming more and more video based. And as we go through the next 5 to 10 years, video streaming is what most people engage with on the internet. So depending on what you're doing, there are many different ways you could create a video for your work. So for example, let's say you have a healing center in your local area. Now, if I've never been into that healing center, but you happen to put a video on a Facebook page or in a newsletter that lets me meet you for 3 minutes, lets me take a little tour of the healing center, and you explain to me, oh, this is what we do here, I suddenly have a feeling about it. You go from being this abstract building with a name Healing Center, which I immediately start thinking about all the other healing centers I've ever known. Oh yeah, there was that good healing center. Yeah, I didn't have a good experience at that healing center. So at the moment, you're not unique to me. I don't know who you are. I don't know what your vibration is. I might like the outside of your building. I'm like, oh, the outside of the building's nice. But it's a very intimate thing to come into a healing center and have a session. But if I see somebody on video, and this is the beauty of video, video is magnetic because we can feel on a video. It's a very sensory thing. So one of the reasons that I think my work grew when I started appearing on video is it helps people select you and it helps people deselect you. And you don't need to be afraid of that. If somebody doesn't like me on a video or my vibe or thinks that I'm not quite right for them, they won't come to one of my events. But equally, if somebody sees a video and they decide, oh yeah, he looks okay, or he feels like my language, they're going to feel safer to come to my event. I'm the same. I can tell within 10, 15 seconds of seeing someone on video whether or not they're the right resonance for me. And again, we're all busy. There's a lot going on in our world and there's a lot of choice. So video is magnetic. It helps people connect to you, feel whether you're right for them. And the thing about video is you have to learn to be really authentic. And the way I have always kind of taught people whenever we're at Impact the World training, or when I've worked with people one-on-one in the past, which I used to do a lot, you have to treat the camera like a person. So this would be me not treating the camera like a person. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my 8 lessons I learned while building my business. Tonight, we're going to go through 4 things. I mean, you know, I may as well be doing an audiobook. I mean, that would be fine for an audiobook. I mean, it's probably still a little stiff, but it would be okay on audio. But if I'm going to be on camera, I have to learn to be natural. I have to be treating this camera like it's you. And that's what I'm doing. So when I do my energy updates, I feel who's on the other side of the camera. And if this isn't something you've become used to, the best way you can start is by thinking of a friend, a client, a person that you think this message is for. So if I was the healing center making the video and I was like, oh, I'm a bit nervous to stand on camera and talk about my Reiki sessions, I go, okay, well, Barbara loves my Reiki sessions. She comes in every Thursday. I'm going to do this video as if I'm talking to Barbara. So you imagine Barbara, or you imagine a group of people, and you use the camera to just be the teleporter, but to get you to those people, and to trust that you're not trying to prove anything or do anything. You're just showing up and putting something out there that will go through the camera, and then the right people will come back to you because the magnetism will work, and equally the magnetism will repel. And that's perfect. It's good for everybody that people have the best sense of you, because you're going to have the better experience. I really noticed a level of trust in me when I started doing energy update videos. It changed all my one-on-one sessions, because all the people who came already had a resonance with me most of the time, unless they were sent by a friend or gifted. And that really changed everything. So getting on video, even just once or twice, or regularly, if it's part of your work, is really important. And you can practice, get a friend to help you. There are so many different ways that you will accelerate your work when you do that. Okay. Scale, another piece. Team member compatibility. Team member compatibility. So, you know, at one point I was completely solo, and I would hire out occasionally, like I got someone to build me a website in 2005, which was a short project, and then it was done, and then I was running it myself. But these days I work with a team of people. And I have a phrase, and it's a phrase that I share with every member of our team when they come in the door, and it's something we repeat. Talent is everywhere. Attitude is gold. To me, attitude is a talent. And I think in the various things I've done, I've worked a lot in customer service. I worked a lot in theater. I've done all kinds of different jobs before this career. And I've met many talented people, and talent doesn't really impress me. Attitude really impresses me. Talent is everywhere. Everybody is talented in some way, but a really great attitude is its own value and is its own talent. And it can be the life or the death of a team, your attitude. So the tricky thing about, I think, hiring a team is many people get scared because they're like, oh, I don't know who to hire. And you've got to be careful, because you mustn't hire someone's highest potential. This is a healer trap. You know, it's like, oh, well, I'm hiring my friend because she's really miserable right now and she needs a job and I can afford this. And I think that maybe she'd be really good at this, so we're going to give it a go. That's really beautiful and honorable, but make sure that if it isn't working in a month or two, you have that conversation rather than keep hoping that you're going to empower this person to become what you need them to become. It's a bit of a thing with the healer community, and I went through it so much. And there's nothing wrong with the learning lessons that we go through when we work with each other, whether you're being hired as a team member or whether you're the person hiring a team, as I now am in that position. But it can be very painful. It's very painful to let somebody go. It's not easy to have to let somebody go from a team. But one of the things that I learned is, your team is if you like, the protector for the entity of the business. And if you've got a team member that either isn't pulling their weight and they're putting pressure on the rest of the team, or perhaps they've got behaviors and dynamics that they're running, they're trying to heal their anger issues or their ego issues or whatever it is inside the company, that can be really tricky. We're all human, we all have our stuff, but you want a team to operate harmonically, because a team that is enjoying what they're doing, working together in flow, is a team that then creates that harmony into the business. So I've been privy to and witnessed very toxic dynamics behind the scenes of things, and I've seen how it can just jeopardize the work. So you have to make sure when you're hiring a team that you are bringing on board the right people. And I remember seeing a Gary Vee video he's an entrepreneur trainer and very dynamic speaker. I haven't seen much of his work, but I saw one video and it really, the phrase resonated with me. And I think I heard it somewhere else as well. It was hire slowly, fire quickly. And if you'd have said that to me 10 years ago, I'd have been like, oh, that sounds awful. But actually, it's really key. It's like you should hire slowly. And so one of the things I always advise people is have a trial period. With anyone you take on, have an agreed trial period of 2 months or 3 months, so that not only can you see that it's right for you, but so that that person also doesn't feel beholden to what they're doing with you, and that everybody can check this is the right place for them. Very important, especially for sensitives, so running businesses, because if you're anything like me, you won't enjoy conflict. I've got better at it, but it used to really bring me down whenever I had to intervene with a team member. Now I've got good at it and I've got better at it, because I know that we have to protect the business as a whole so that we continue to serve everybody out front. But I also spiritually know that it's no fun for anybody when they're stuck in the wrong position, in the wrong place. And sometimes other people don't work that out for themselves, and you might have to be the one to make the judgment call. So this is why hiring carefully and being steady about it is a really good thing. Okay, we are moving on. Scale, still the area of scale. Invest wisely in the right areas and in calculated ways. Okay, things that you don't do well. Like, that you're awful at the accounts and you spend weeks procrastinating with the accounts, not doing a very good job, stressing yourself about it. That's when you have to hire an accountant, because the amount of money that you're costing the business and the amount of stress you're costing yourself by being very ineffective at a job that you don't like, when you could instead be hiring that out to someone else and using the revenue in the business to do that so that you can carry on over here doing what you're good at. It's really important. So investing wisely in people is really good. Being careful too, I see this a lot, and I definitely had this a little bit in the beginning. Be careful if you've got an attitude of, well, I don't know anything about building a website, but I've given this company $5,000 and they said they're going to do it and haven't seen anything for 6 weeks. Be very careful about throwing a lot of money at an area that you don't know much about without asking for updates and results along the way. I would also advise that, if you're about to hire somebody or something, do a bit of research on that area. Take an hour online to go, what are the most important things about building a website, so that you have some knowledge of what you're throwing your money at. Because I've seen a lot of people throw a lot of money at what they think are going to be fixes for their business or gold for their business. And actually, because they didn't really know enough about the area and they didn't manage that person effectively or get enough of an update along the way, you can really throw money in the wrong direction. But equally, when are you costing your business money is a really good thing to look at. I know for me, in about 2011, I knew I was able to earn a certain amount of money from doing private sessions a week. And so, I couldn't do private sessions for 40 hours a week because it's just energetically, it's too much. But I knew that because I think at that point I was around $200 an hour for a session, which was great. So I could do, say, 6 or 7 of those a week, and I had the waiting list for that I could then afford to find somebody who would work for $30 an hour or $25 an hour to help me with the customer service aspects, so that I wasn't working all the time and doing everything myself. So again, investing wisely in a calculated way. I always told myself, well, I'll take this person on, and if for any reason it doesn't help me grow the business to have customer service, which was my instinct, I thought bringing this person on is going to help me grow things. I thought, well, I can always do another reading. I can always add 1 more reading a week if there's any reason. So rather than throwing a lot of money at things, I've always been a believer in, calculate and be cautious and try a little bit more and then see how it goes. And especially if you're someone who's looking to scale your business, when you get to the point that you can afford to put some money behind advertising, say on Facebook or on YouTube, and either you learn how to do those adverts or you hire someone who specializes in those, that can be a really great way to find more people when you're ready to scale up. That was something that made a difference for me a few years ago. Okay, number 7 is wellness. Overwhelm and stress need managing. Yeah, the good thing about burnout is it tells you that you haven't been managing your overwhelm and stress, and perhaps you haven't been noticing your overwhelm and stress. Anybody on this call ever had burnout? Anybody had it more than once? I haven't had it for quite a while. For a good, I think I really had it badly in about 2014. I tried to do too much, and I wasn't noticing how taxing everything was until it was too late. So I still, like anybody on the planet these days, overwhelm and stress hit us. It's a constant course correction. It's like, oh, wow, this month has been more intense than I expected. There was family drama. There was a lot more taken out of me at this event. So you constantly adjust. But we have a phrase in my company, which we use less these days because there are more of us. But I still hold true, and I tell the team this. The phrase is, if we can't make the deadline, we move the deadline. I don't want the team or me overly stressed trying to get something out to the people that we're serving, because then that energy of stress is going to go into what we do. Doesn't mean there aren't times we're busy, because there are times we're busier. There are times we're a bit more tired. But if we're really stressing, if someone in the team if they have a task that only they can do and they clearly look burnt out, I always offer them the opportunity to take time out. And the same for me, like if I'm trying to do too much and I catch that I'm getting a bit fried, I start to move things around. Because you, as a worker, whether you're the owner of the company, a member of the company, you are the asset. Your energy is what makes things happen. So if you aren't looking after your energy, you're going to find it will hit you quite hard. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is I'm constantly finding new ways to look after myself. I committed to fitness a couple of years ago. I was earning more income, so I was able to afford to hire a personal trainer, which is what works for me. For someone else, it's a Peloton. For someone else, it's a class. But it helped me with my stamina when I could start to do this in the mornings. And it was an investment in myself, sure, but it was also an investment in the business in a way, because me going and having that good workout every morning with someone else who's making the decisions for me, which is key because I make a lot of decisions throughout the day. So to have somebody else do that for me in an area that isn't my expertise is great. So overwhelm and stress are real things that we have to manage. And as your work grows and as what you're building grows, you will have to adjust. And especially for those of you who are parents, I'm not a parent, and I feel like the business is in a way my kids. Especially if you're a parent, you have to find ways to manage your stress. And what I will say is that especially new entrepreneurs need inner and outer systems. What I mean by this is when you first leave a traditional job where someone else is telling you what time you work, giving you a structure, whether you're an independent contractor for another company, in which case you might be working from home, or whether you're the owner of a business or an entrepreneur yourself, figuring out your routines and your systems is really important. And it's something you have to create. And often we create it the hard way because we realize our limits and we cross them, and then we go, oh, I need a bit more time off in a week. I need to preserve that bit of time on a Wednesday morning. Okay, the eighth one I left up to randomness because I couldn't decide which one should be the eighth one. So, ooh, I'm going to go with this one. Okay, keep yourself interested and engaged. You should never become a slave to your business. There might be times you feel like it. There might be times where you feel like you have to work harder, but keep yourself interested and engaged in what you're doing. And if you ever feel like you are a slave to what you're doing, or you're just doing it perhaps for the paycheck, or you're doing it because other people expect you to do the thing, but you don't really want to do the thing anymore, you have to create. You have to look at, okay, what aspect of the business is my joy, and I'm going to keep that there, and what do I need to do that's new? So for me in 2016, I had been a teacher of spirituality and metaphysics for 12 years, and I was feeling a little bit stuck, and I was feeling like something needed to change, and I didn't know what it was. I was having lots of one-on-one clients who were coming to me who wanted to do what I did and who wanted to take their careers out into the world. So I really considered resigning. It was tricky because I thought, well, what am I going to do instead? I don't really know, and it was tricky because it was also something that was working and that I did enjoy, but something in me didn't feel right. Something felt off. And so I went on this 28-date tour, which I was invited to do by an agency. And I thought, okay, well, let's go and do that. And two things happened. Meeting everybody on the tour re-energized my reason for doing things, and it helped me see that I was serving something far bigger than myself, and that felt very fulfilling. To meet people in Australia or in Canada or in England or in America who would hold my hand and say, thank you so much for the energy updates, you have no idea what they've done for me. That really meant something to me. So that made it clear that I didn't want to stop. Then at the end of that year, my friend took me to Brendan Burchard's Experts Academy. And it was and I really enjoyed the Experts Academy. I mean, Brendan's brilliant at what he does. But what was really interesting for me was I saw that he was training entrepreneurs. And I thought, oh, this is what I'm doing a lot in my one-on-ones. I too could do an event like this. And I would love to do that. And it terrified me. So we created Impact the World, which we put on in San Diego in April 2018. We decided to keep it to 65 people. So we got this lovely hotel, this beautiful room, and it sold out. And I've never been so terrified to host an event as I was to host Impact the World. And I will say that it's the thing I'm most proudest of in every event I've ever done. And I mean, I've done over 200 events, 200 and something around the world at this point. And yeah, I think it was because it was a challenge to myself, but it also lights me up to see people do what they do in the world and to help them with that. So it was me reinventing what I did. I didn't have to stop what I was doing on the left, but I knew that I had to add a strand on the right. I knew that I needed to grow, and that if I didn't let myself grow, I and what I did would become stagnant. So to know that even if what you're doing is successful or wanted or desired, as you grow with it, it's going to ask you to change. It's going to ask you to re-energize it. So yeah, I invite you to keep yourself interested and engaged. And if you find you aren't interested and engaged, check out, is there enough in your personal life to fulfill you? Or have you neglected your personal life and you need to re-energize that? And if you do that and you still feel a little bit, it's time to add a few strands to what you do. So thank you, everybody. They are 8 of the 20 lessons that I couldn't decide between sharing with you today. And I see that we've gone through quite a lot of time, but I'm really happy to do about 20 minutes or so of your questions. So I'm going to invite Noah onto the call. Noah, hi.
Hey Lee, how are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
That was great. I enjoyed it and always learning from you and always I love listening to this stuff. So enjoyed that very much.
Thank you. And by the way, everyone listening, if you haven't met Noah at one of our live events, Noah is our event manager and he is COO of my company. So he is shoulder to shoulder with me and the team on everything that we do here. And he will be at Impact the World in Scottsdale, Arizona in April.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So we took a bunch of questions and I'd love to jump right in because there's some really good ones that I'd love to hear
Great.
your take on. So I'll start. The first one reads, Lee, how do you keep your own energy field stable when interacting and connecting with so many people, personally and energetically, through offering your service?
Um, well, I would say that I've found that I have a fairly quiet life. I have a fairly non-quiet work life and I have a fairly quiet personal life. And luckily, I married someone who also likes a quiet life. So the way I stay balanced with the work that we do is I have found a place to live, and this office and studio space are in very quiet places surrounded by a lot of nature. So that then when we travel and go off and do what we do, or if we're here broadcasting and creating videos, in the downtime of doing that work or doing behind the scenes work on the business itself, I can be quiet and more introverted. And that really helps me refuel and recharge. I also found that physical fitness really helps keep my body moving everything. And when we do events, I would say my biggest ally, apart from music, is water. So for example, we just did this lovely event in Portland. I had 220 people there on Saturday, and I must have met 120 of them maybe in the signing line at the end. So as soon as the event was over, I went home, I showered, I do some affirmations such as I release any energies and emotions that are not mine so that I can clear my field. And then the next morning I woke up at 7 o'clock and got straight in the bathtub. So water is one of my shamanic processes whenever I'm interacting physically and energetically with people. And so is soothing music and verbal affirmations. And yeah, having a quiet life when I'm here in between the work that we do really helps me keep balanced. Thanks for the question.
Great, thank you. The next question reads, Dear Lee, I work as a self-employed healer and yoga teacher. How can I have clearer boundaries between my own personal time and when I'm working? People I work with often develop a very close relationship to me, and I need space when I'm not working. How have you established balance between work and life and not sacrificing either to feel good within yourself?
Well, it's interesting, and I feel like there's probably some crossover for you in the way I'm going to answer your question, because I realize that I like to be, in the work I do, I like to be 100% present and 100% there, but I can't be 100% present and 100% there all my life. That's not my makeup. I need inward time, I need quiet time. So I had to learn with as this work grew and as more people, and still, I mean, I still learn this now, but as more people wanted your time, your energy, I had to learn to get really good at saying no. And it doesn't mean you're always using the words no, but for example, I used to be somebody who was on the phone a lot in my 20s. Like I hardly ever speak on the phone these days. So if people, there are certain, I had to close down one avenue. So my phone will pretty much always go to voicemail because I often have it somewhere in the room. So I had to quarantine the amount of ways I was available. Email, text message, that's enough for me. I can't add phone calls to it because it's too much energy. But I also had to get really good at being a guardian for myself, because the person who is going to text you and say, can I just ask you a question about yesterday's session? Or email you and say, would you mind just reading my book and giving me some feedback? There's nothing wrong with that person's request. What they don't realize is how many people are doing it to you. And if you don't take charge of, no, this is the time I need to be off, even if at first it makes you feel uncomfortable, and it probably will, because it did for me. It wasn't easy for me to say no to people. It wasn't easy for me to not be available to people, because some part of my programming thought I had to be. And what I learned was the only way you grow as a person, grow as a healer, and grow your scale of your work in the world, or the quality of your work in the world, perhaps it's not scale you're looking for, is to preserve yourself and to recognize that it's no one else's fault. No one else is going to say, I was going to ask you a question, but I realized everyone's sucking on your energy, so I'm not going to do that. I'll hear that a lot, but they are the minority. Most people see you as the source. In your case, they will see you as the source of who can help them. And it's your job to tell them when it's not your place or your time to help them, and to trust they'll find help elsewhere. If someone's starving and they knock on your door asking for food, they don't tend to just sit on your front lawn and starve. If they're starving and you say no, they will go and find the food elsewhere. They will go and knock on another door. And equally, you will know if it's an emergency. If it's an emergency, you'll bypass your own tiredness. If you're the person that's supposed to respond, you'll feel it in your body and you'll go, oh, I have to go. So I don't think the problem is other people. I think the problem is us. And we have to get good at being clear and honest about our boundaries, and giving people really kind of a way of dealing with us that helps us recover and replenish. So I hope that helps, and good luck.
Thank you, Lee. The next question reads, I have two businesses. One is 22 years old. The other is almost 3 years old. When you feel that you have reached burnout in the past or a wall in growth, what are the tools you have used to move through that and embrace a new path, make the changes needed to move forward?
Well, I've now learned that burnout is more important than anything, meaning I've learned that the business and the work I do can't be bigger than my own needs. And I'm pretty devoted to my work in that I give it my energy every week, and I'm happy to do that. And that's a choice I've made. But if I haven't managed myself, or I haven't quite, and sometimes no fault of my own, there's just been an accumulation of events or challenges or problems or stressors that I didn't foresee or didn't schedule brilliantly for, then I have to go, oh, okay, I have to take today off. So I would say in the short term, you have to prioritize your burnout, because if you burn out completely, nothing's going to happen. But it's interesting what you're saying about 22 and 3-year business. I'm imagining that can be challenging, like knowing which one to give your energy to and when. And perhaps the newness of the 3-year one might be more challenging and or more exciting. When you talk about your 22-year-old one, that feels like this beautiful oak tree that can hold you if you want it to in a certain way. But the 3-year-old one feels a little more kind of frenetic or energetic. So what I would say to you about the burnout is make sure that you aren't trying to be everything to those two businesses. Maybe you need more support in one or both of them, or maybe if that's not what you want to do, you have to go, okay, this business rests a little bit while this business gets served. And to not forget yourself. The business is its own entity, and that's a good way to look at our businesses. They become their own entity with the people who they serve, the team within them, us, but we too are an entity, and we too need to be able to refuel and step out. So I shared a little bit about how I re-energized my own relationship to the business by bringing on board, funnily enough, 3 years ago, starting to walk towards training healers, soul-focused entrepreneurs, creatives, change makers, how to take their work out into the world in a wider way. And that being a new strand that I developed separate to the self-growth, transformational work, empath-sensitive work that I do. And that really helped re-energize me. But at the same time, you can't do all of it at once. If if there's only a small team, you have to meter out your time, and some of that time has to be for you. Otherwise, the whole thing falls down. So I hope you're able to carve out time for you. And it's okay to have slow periods with our work. I think we have this idea of it must stay consistent or it must always grow. And that's not really life. You know, there are quiet periods, there are less popular periods, there are less successful periods. So you might just need a little bit of rest, my friend. Hope that helps, and good luck.
Thanks, Lee. The next question reads, I do not have a business or make six figures. I'm transitioning into my work of true purpose. Is there a place for me in your Impact the World workshop? Thank you.
Yeah, we had actually quite a lot of people in the room who hadn't even started a business in 2018. And the feedback that we had from those people, I'm thinking of one in particular. Well, actually, that's not true. She had a personal reading business, but she hadn't yet started to have a newsletter or even a website or anything beyond the fact that people had her number to hire her as an intuitive. And the feedback that we had from so many people was that Impact the World, what we aim to do is 2 to 3 main things. Number one, we look at mindset, energetics, and wellness for the entrepreneur, which is really important. And that's a key strand of all the presentations. But then we also look at the practical nuts and bolts and all the different ways that you can work in the world. So for example, I did a presentation on podcasts that was maybe an hour long. And I talked about what podcasts can do for your business, what they can do for your audience, some of the statistics about podcasts. And one lady left and went, oh my God, I had never thought I wanted to do a podcast. You did that presentation, you explained it to me, and now I've got this podcast that's going really well and I love it. So we actually try to give you a menu of choices and items, show you all these different ways that you could bring your work into the world to help you scale your business, and also look at the courage required and some of the stuff that we go through around money, because that's often a big block. But I will tell you that, you know, I spent 2 years doing readings for people part-time before I left my other work, and went full-time after 2 years of doing readings part-time. So I'm not an advocate of just bin what you're doing or trash what you're doing right now to try and take a gamble on a career. I'm all about, you know, feel it out and take your time and figure it out. So Impact the World, the training course, offers you an opportunity to be in an entrepreneurial energy, to see what choices you have, and to problem solve some of the issues you have through the Q&A and through some of the speakers that I bring along too. So I hope that helps. And if it resonates for you, we'd love to see you there.
Thank you, Lee. The next question reads, how do you put a dollar value on things of a spiritual nature? How do you decide? And how do you keep it pure in a capitalist system?
Yeah, I don't think a capitalist system is very pure either. But I also, for me, I embrace that unless I want to be a monk, I do live in a capitalist system. And that was something I had to really embrace, to be honest. It's funny, one of the things that it took me years to work out was we pay for things we value. You might be sitting with a friend, and I talk about this in my Abundance Upshift course. It's all about knowing what you value, and we don't mind giving money to things that we value. But what I give money to that I value you might think, oh God, I would never pay that much money for that over there. So value is very personal. And I remember in my 20s, it was interesting to me that I was so willing to pay considerable amounts of money for the workshops that I was attending. I mean, I feel like workshops were a lot more expensive 12, 13 years ago than they are now. I was often going on credit cards to do workshops because I just felt that it was the right thing to do. But I had a real problem charging for what I did because of that very same question you have about spirituality. I didn't really believe, some people go, oh, well, if it's your guides, why are you charging for it? And I'm like, well, it's actually my energy. You know, it's not like the energy isn't running through my body. It's like, why do people get paid when they run around a restaurant serving tables, giving their life force, giving their energy, there is a trade and barter system at work on the planet, unless you're somebody who's so rich you don't need to work. But what I will say to you is, I think there are ways to, within a capitalist system, feel like you are balancing the money exchange. I am so happy that I learned to charge more money for my one-on-one sessions at the time periods that I did. I went from being $10 an hour, it's $15, it's £10. After I stopped donations, I made it a minimum of $15 an hour. If I hadn't got to the level of scale with my sessions that was appropriate based on my waiting list, I would have probably had a 2-year waiting list if I hadn't increased my value. But what I then did was I hired team members and we produced free material. So I probably spend, including some of the advertising revenue, we probably spend almost $4,000 producing an energy update now. And that's not for my time. But that's fantastic because people do not pay $1 for an energy update, and it's helping several 100,000 people every month. So the way I look at it is, you have to make sure that you can afford your rent and your food, which was what I did first. And then as things grow around what you do, you can use the money to be benevolent. We get to give at the moment around $12,000 a year to various charities. So I like being able to have reached a cleanliness around the financial relationship in myself, that I'm actually able to pay the wages of, 12 people a month, that we're able to support some charities we care about. And for example, the podcast that we're just producing now, it's not cheap. And it's something that I'm able to pay for with the revenue that comes in for other work. So I think you have to find the right alignment for you. I've met some people who are very anti money and spirituality, in which case I say produce free videos and find a different way to earn a living. For me, it was different. I was really all in. I was all in on this work. And so for me, the revenue coming in has allowed me to find different ways to offer free content back out. And I was a child of the 70s, so I was used to paying for spiritual books and paying for spiritual workshops. We didn't have free material when I was growing up, and I wish we had. So I kind of love being part of that now. So I hope that answers your question, and good luck with your process around that.
Thanks, Lee. I've got one more question here that I'd like to ask you before we wrap up. And it reads, hi, Lee, how do I do the work in the world that I'm meant to do when I'm not sure what area to focus on? I have several areas of interest, but all the feedback I hear is that I have to niche down to one topic. This is creating a dissonance for me, and I wonder if you have any suggestions. Thank you so much.
I love it. And I think many of us relate to your question. I know I do. I think many creatives, visionaries, people have lots of things they might like to do. And I think it's two things. I think if you're sabotaging yourself by trying to concentrate on 8 things at once and nothing's working, you have to be realistic about that and go, okay, I want to do 8 things at once, but none of them are working. So what would happen if I was willing to put 6 of those things aside and just focus on 2 things for a month? Would I see more progress in those 2 areas? And would those 2 areas progressing then support my ability to activate these other 6 somewhere down the line? So what I mean by that is, I'll use myself as an example. We are currently producing a podcast that is also a video TV show. We have music coming out more that we're working on. We have events. We have so many different areas, but that is not how my business looked 10 years ago at all. It started, remember, just with readings. And so I think what happens is, as you successfully build one area or one aspect of your work, you can start to then bring other areas out. So 10, 12 years ago, I would have needed another company to fund or allow me to do the things I'm doing today. But because I built the areas that are working and allowed it to take time. I think that's another really good lesson. You really have to be willing to let your business and your work take time. Hey, if you have some overnight success or some overnight fast breakthrough, great. That's really great, but that's not the norm, especially not when you're creating things in the 3D world. It can take time to get things going. So focus on what do you think is going to work the most, and would having a few of those things working support you financially, your self-esteem, practically, emotionally, and how would that then feed into these other things? But as for people saying you've got to niche down, there are lots of teachers out there, whether they're entrepreneur teachers or spiritual teachers, who will tell you that it's a certain way. I personally never believe that. I think all any of us are ever doing as teachers is sharing possibilities. And if ever a teacher is trying to force you into a way, then it tends to mean that they're quite tunnel vision on their own way. And they're assuming that that's going to transpose onto you. And that's not how it works. We're all unique and we're all supposed to do unique things. But I have sometimes met people who are frustrated or annoyed about having to focus on one thing when they're like focusing on 8. And it can be a kind of subtle sabotage. It can be a subtle way of not ever letting anything succeed. So I would ask yourself, if I could focus on 2 of my 8 things this year, what would be the easiest to make successful, and what is the most time appropriate? You know, what is the world wanting right now of the 8 things that you do? Where is the value of those 8 things? So for example, if in the area you live, there's a real need for healers right now, and you see that the healers that you know, they're pretty busy, and one of your 8 things is healing, well, that's an area that currently people want. So it would be good for you to put some energy toward that, because the very energy of success in itself and having a wheel going in an area, so you're a desired healer, you're receiving energy and finance in exchange for the energy you're giving out, and you're learning, that can bolster what you then take into this next part of your business or your work, and that what you next want to activate. So you can do it all. You just can't do it all today, or perhaps even this year. And I hope that helps and makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Noah.
Yeah, my pleasure, Lee. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I've mentioned the Impact the World podcast. That's our new weekly show. It is a YouTube show, but it is also a podcast. You can either listen on any of your favorite podcast platforms, and you can also watch it in video form at my YouTube channel. So if you go to leeharrisenergy.com, you'll see a tab on the top called podcast. You can hit there, and there'll be plenty of entrepreneur tips along the way in the months to come, as well as conversations. And for those of you who are interested in coming to Scottsdale, Arizona, April 1st through the 5th for the Impact the World training, we can't wait to do it. It's the first one we've done in 2 years. We're very excited. We have some great guest speakers coming along. Stephen Washington, my husband, who many of you will know, will be bringing his Qigong work in short but very potent blasts throughout each day, so that we keep our energy alive as we're learning. My social media expert, Nick, is going to beam in on the screen for 2 separate sessions all about social media. So we're going to look at the basics of social media, and also what are the current trends and specialities, because social media is a tricky area to figure out. So we're going to give that a good amount of time. We're going to look at what are your values as an entrepreneur? What is the importance of a newsletter, and how are good ways to create your newsletter? We're going to break down every area of the business that you might be putting out into the world, or perhaps haven't yet activated, as to how you could use it to spread your message, inspire yourself and others. And I'll be taking lots of Q&A as we go, and I'll have guest speakers, Sarah Landon, Wendy Kennedy, Noah Perabo. Barry Goldstein is coming in to do an evening of sound healing as a kind of recreational evening. We're going to have a dance one night. So there'll be lots of intimate time and lots of networking with the other entrepreneurs. So Hope to see you there. And if we don't see you there, thanks so much for tuning in, and good luck with all you're doing. Big love, everyone. Take care.